The kind who dares to point a gun at a black woman's head in the dead of night, completely unaware that just a few steps away stands a living nightmare ready to rip his world apart. Under the venomous glow of a rundown gas station, blood dripped from the black woman's shoulder like a countdown to carnage. The white cop barked orders like he owned the moment, but he had no idea that behind her stood a government-trained killing machine, a Delta Force commander. No sirens, no warning, just a cold, steel gaze and the breath of a predator who had already locked onto his target. And when the bullet tore through the air, it didn't just pierce flesh. It shredded careers, torched reputations, and annihilated the cheap illusion of authority. That night, justice didn't come from a courtroom. It came from a brother, a warrior, and a vow. Touch my blood, and I'll erase you from the map. What state are you in? Where you live? Is silence just a habit, or is it the sentence for cowards? Amidst the fluorescent glow of a rundown gas station, the night air was electric with tension. It was supposed to be just another quick stop before dinner, but for those caught in its throes, it would become a stain on their memories. The white cop's pistol gleamed darkly under the harsh light as it aimed at the heart of it all, a young black woman, her breath shallow and rapid, clutching a bleeding shoulder. The sound of her brother's steady, controlled breathing met the flickering hum of the gas pumps, creating a drumbeat of anticipation. There he was, standing just a few feet away, cloaked and calm like a soldier awaiting battle. In this small universe, under the indifference of night, lines of justice and prejudice were brutally crossed. No one knew, and certainly not the officer with the trigger finger itching toward mayhem, that the brother emerged from shadows deeper than any could imagine. From behind the veil of routine cruelty, a trained killer looked on, a Delta Force commander by trade, whose silent gaze promised a reckoning. Their bond was forged in the heated forge of life's trials, impenetrable and defiant against the world's attempts to fracture it. Camille always admired how Michael handled pressure, how he could diffuse a volatile situation with just a glance, a quiet word. Growing up in an unforgiving neighborhood, they had learned to rely on each other from an early age. Camille, with her fiery determination and unwavering compassion, emerged as a community voice, advocating for justice and equality. Michael, on the other hand, served his country, allowing his innate strength and strategic mind to lead him as an elite Delta Force commander. From the time they were mere children, hiding from the echo of gunshots and the wails that punctuated their nights, Michael had vowed to protect Camille. He would read military strategy books under the dim streetlights, while she voiced dreams of becoming an attorney, wielding justice for those who couldn't wield it for themselves. They were two halves of the same soul, knitted together by love, fear, and the indomitable will to survive. You don't have to be strong all the time, Camille would remind him, seeing through his stoic facade to the vulnerability he hid from the world. Michael would chuckle, shaking his head with affection. I got you, sis. Always. But as they stood now, amidst the chaos and flashing blue and red lights, that familiar promise was stretched to its limit. Camille, her denim shirt soaked with her own blood, to stay conscious, her eyes locking with Michael's. There was a silent exchange, an understanding that no matter the outcome, they would face it together. Her lips quivered into a soft smile, despite the pain. Just like old times, huh? Michael had to force himself to breathe, jaw clenched as he absorbed her words. His mind was a storm of calculations, devising strategies even as his heart twisted with rage and fear. The situation was delicate. A wrong move could tip it into uncontainable violence. He looked at her, anchoring himself in those memories of shared laughter and tears, her voice the melody in the symphony of his life. The split-second decisions he had to make in the heat of dangerous operations didn't compare to the gravity of this moment. His training whispered protocols and tactics, urging restraint and control. "Stand down, sir! Keep your hands where I can see them," the officer shouted, a harsh intrusion on their intimate world, shattering the fragile tranquility with his raw antagonism. Through it all, Camille's quiet strength seeped into him, promising that come what may, they would rise from this trial, stronger, wiser, and, most importantly, together. The hum of the gas station stood as a stark contrast to the chaotic whirlwind of the escalating confrontation. Michael stood firm, his presence a controlled storm that mirrored the tempest swirling internally. The officer, oblivious to the intricate dance of danger and discipline in Michael's eyes, took one step closer, his pace almost leisurely, emboldened by his weapon. Camille's labored breathing was the only sound Michael truly heard, each inhale and exhale a reminder of everything they had endured to reach this point. The officer's voice barked commands. "Get down, both of you, now!" It was the tone of a man used to immediate obedience, one accustomed to power backed by the badge he wore. But Michael was not one to be cowed easily, certainly not a man who would kneel when injustice stared him in the face. He analyzed the scene with a soldier's precision. 2 officers, one leading the charge with his partner hanging back, a perfunctory figure offering strength in numbers. The people gathered, a collection of voyeurs, some filming, some whispering, most doing nothing but standing by, their curiosity tinged with fear. Camille sagged against her brother as the officer jabbed the barrel of his gun dangerously toward her, a decision that would prove to be his undoing. Her eyes met Michael's, silently communicating a truth that only those as closely bound could interpret. It was a plea wrapped in courage, a fleeting understanding that she trusted him to protect, to end this. "What's the problem, officer?" Michael's voice came out smooth, professionally calm, with an undercurrent of authority. A part of him itched to expose the truth, to enlighten this man that the situation was far from what he presumed, but he held his tongue. Timing was everything. The officer's eyes narrowed. "This area's known for trouble. I see you two stirring the pot. We've got reports. Now, down." His words were a pretext, an excuse as worn as the concrete underfoot, trite justifications echoing with systemic rot. Michael's fury simmered beneath his skin, threatening to seep out with each beat of his heart. It was more than this moment. It was the accumulated weight of years of discrimination, the injustices that threw shadows across their lives, mere miles away from this very spot. In his peripheral vision, the second officer shifted, a telltale sign of nerves. Michael cataloged these subtle shifts, indicators of unease, the tremor in the hand holding a weapon. They were outmatched, and deep down, they likely knew it, though the badge allowed their bravado to flourish. At that moment, Camille stirred, her grip on Michael tightening for an instant, a silent signal. Instinct and training melded within him, a balancing act of patience and precision. He needed to defuse the situation until the advantage turned in their favor. Every instinct screamed that the time to reveal himself was approaching. The officer's puffed-up authority was brittle, and the second was already questioning their actions. But there needed to be no more escalation. Not yet. Not until he could ensure Camille's safety above all else. "Easy," Michael said, his hands relaxed at his sides, every fiber of his being honed toward resolution. This was more than just combat now. It was the battle for dignity, for respect, for every moment that led to this place. And he'd fight it, even if the world insisted he shouldn't have to. The officer, fueled by adrenaline and ignorance, misread Michael's stance for submission. "That's more like it," he sneered, allowing the victory to light his features prematurely, blind to the delta force within the man before him. Michael shifted slightly, his senses keenly aware of every heart-racing moment, silently promising that the scales would tip and justice, unexpected and swift, would follow. The air had turned brittle, as if every passing second threatened to shatter the tenuous piece holding the scene together. Michael's senses were heightened, every detail recorded and analyzed with a clarity that seemed almost detached. The officer's grip on his gun was too tight, the barrel edging nervously closer to Camille, who held her gaze level with a courage that made Michael's heart constrict with both pride and fear. And then it came, the deafening crack of a gunshot. It reverberated through the space, a malicious punctuation mark against the darkened sky. In that instant, time fractured, dragging all clarity and order into chaos. Camille's body jerked back, a raw cry escaping her lips as she staggered against the sharp incline of pain. The blood, vibrant and immediate against denim, told its own horrifying story. The fragility of life was no match against brutality. Michael was moving before the sound of the discharge faded. His mind was a crucible of denial and action, each step calculated, echoing the structured movements he'd deployed on distant battlefields. Everything he knew about restraint and composure, about calculated responses under fire, coalesced into a singular focus: to reach her, to protect her. Camille's eyes were wide, not with fear but an indomitable will. Despite the searing pain, she reached for Michael, her hands slick and warm with blood, a truth that twisted the knife embedded in his soul. Her breath came shallow and rapid, each inhalation laden with the metallic scent of adrenaline and copper. "Stay with me, Camille. I'm right here," Michael commanded, his tone softened only by the terror clawing at his voice. The officer took a step back, shock momentarily dislodging his authority. Beside him, his partner's eyes flickered with uncertainty and dawning realization, a whisper of awareness that this was not unfolding as it should. Yet neither prepared for the impending revelation. An onlooker's phone was recording, capturing the chaos and obliterating any attempt to control the narrative. Amid screams and the sharp murmur of disbelief, Michael made his move. His hands shot up, not in surrender but to grasp the flaps of his jacket. In one fluid motion, he yanked it aside, revealing the commando patch on his shirt, a burnished symbol of allegiance and lethal proficiency. The effect was immediate and visceral. Recognition flared in the eyes of the officer and his sidekick, a creeping dread cooling the heated bravado that had once suffused their demeanor. What was meant to be a night of misguided dominance had spiraled into a miscalculation that promised dire consequences. Michael's voice cut through the thick haze of shock and disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His words were not shouted, but delivered with an intensity that flayed any pretense of authority the officers clung to. It was a command, a force as sure as any bullet, one that brooked no argument. The cop spluttered, his eyes darting to the partner, who now appeared more liability than ally. The constraints of their training seemed to dissolve beneath the weight of this revelation. Michael held their gaze, the darkness around him an extension of the fury boiling beneath his skin, a conflagration he wielded with unerring precision. Camille's whimper broke through the charged atmosphere, anchoring Michael's focus. The world had gone silent, save for her labored breathing and the echo of his own heartbeats loud in his ears. His anger, though not diminished, was tempered by sheer will, a control reinforced over years as a soldier, a protector. He knew he could end this here, now, but the systemic justice he craved demanded more than just personal retribution. A crowd gathered, thoughts snapped into action. Eyes met screens, documenting, witnessing, ensuring that this moment would neither vanish into obscurity nor fade as another statistic. The shift in the air was palpable, a testimony of power confronted, of truth demanding reckoning. Hands in the air, Michael dared not break his gaze. "Get an ambulance," he commanded, his tone blisteringly calm. The partner fumbled for his radio, awakening from the stupor of culpability, stammering into the device for emergency backup. Another tension, more sinister than before, coiled around them, transforming the scene from a singular act to the precipice of something greater. A few feet away, Camille squeezed his hand weakly. "I'm okay, I promise," she murmured, though her voice was barely above a whisper, strained with effort and underlying pain. Her courage fed his resolve. "This isn't over yet," Michael assured, gripping her hand tighter, transmitting his strength as he felt the weight of the night bearing down on them. The reckoning had begun. It surged forward like a tide no power could stop. In this crucible of injustice, Michael knew they would find their justice, not just tonight, but in every fight he waged from this moment forward. The world around them was a cascade of sirens and confused directives, a cacophony that should have blurred into chaos, but for Michael, held a sharp clarity. The moment the Delta Force patch was visible, a hush had fallen over the immediate space, a stark juxtaposition to the turmoil building within and without as more officers responded to the scene. The officer who had fired the shot stood rooted, the arrogance, once buoyed by arrogance, now washed away by the weight of his mistake. Michael stepped into that silence with purpose, steeling himself with every glance thrown their way, each one a mix of distress, blame, and belated respect. He remained crouched, holding Camille steady, who was now managing shaky breaths, her complexion paling, but still defiant. The medical team was on its way, their arrival heralding the hope in order amid the chaos. But Michael knew hope was merely the beginning. Exposure required action, and action required strategy. His grip on Camille's hand was grounding, a reminder of the burning fire driving him. "Hang in there, Cammy. Help's coming," he reassured her. The urgency didn't allow his voice to falter, though inside, the turmoil of what had transpired threatened to darken his resolve. Just a few feet away, the officer's partner seemed to grapple with the enormity of their predicament, recognizing too late the avalanche they'd set into motion. He approached, tentatively, his hands shaking, a silent admission of complicity in the unfolding debacle. Words trembled past his lips. I didn't think. But Michael cut through the officer's stammering, his tone a scalpel honed by authority. "What you thought and didn't doesn't matter now. Lives are at stake, and you had better start doing your job right now." Caught between the gravity of their actions and the rapidly gathering spectators, the partner fell silent, his face trapped in the headlights of his own conscience. His radio crackled to life with urgency, punctuating the heavy air, yet delivered no clarity, no absolution. It was a threadbare lifeline slipping through hands that grasped for redemption. "Medical's on its way, sir," he said in a strangled voice, trying to meet Michael's gaze, but flinching under the weight of it. Meanwhile, attendees, unaware of the escalating nightmare, looked on, trying to parse the bounds of this unfolding reality. Those with phones held them aloft, ensuring that every moment was captured, the reckoning laid bare for the world outside. At this epoch, optics mattered as much as actions. Michael helped Camille to a seated position, her head resting against his shoulder, his own heartbeat a metronome steadying them both amid the din of the crowd. Her breath was shallow but rhythmic, her eyes filled with the determined embers of resilience. "I can't afford to lose you, Camille," he spoke softly, his anger tempered by the tenderness he reserved only for her. Then, with instincts honed to perceive openings in the melee, Michael turned to the arriving reinforcements. There was an immediate recognition in their ranks. Some remembered him, his time away having left unmistakable marks even within domestic lines. Uneasy alliances governed by hierarchy and the struggle against entrenched prejudice might yet salve the wounds opened here tonight. The medical responders arrived with swift efficiency, creating a bubble of controlled urgency around Camille. One EMT leaned in with a flashlight to check her eyes, her calm demeanor belying the frantic rush toward stabilization. "You're in good hands now," the EMT assured, pressing a mask over Camille's mouth. Michael felt another shift within him, the relinquishing of control mixed with trust often tested but necessary. As they stabilized Camille, his presence remained an unwavering bulwark against the tide of adversary proceedings. The cop, now drowning under layers of guilt, cast one final glance, the bitter tang of panic lacing the air. "You've shot someone you shouldn't have," Michael finally spoke, straightforward, allowing no room for rebuttal. Yet his eyes, often hard as iron, carried within them a glimmer of possibility, not forgiveness, but perhaps a chance beyond mere compliance. His next move was as much a test for the officers as a verdict of their humanity. But before the officer could respond, Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket. The lawyer, who had been a dormant contact until now, a strategist, whose wisdom now served as a crucial piece in their unfolding chess game. The game was on. The board set by shadows of this night's act. With Camille safely transported, the fight for recognition and recompense began. Michael was resolved, A reckoning born from blood and shadows would unfold, commanded not only by his experience in foreign lands, but equally in the homeland so deeply cherished and mortally wounded. It was a soldier's maneuver to a new battleground, one rooted in systemic challenges and ice-cold revelations. "This isn't the end," Michael whispered to the night, the weight of his words promising the scale of their impact. Justice, long deferred and distant, was now an inevitable storm, rumbling ever closer. As the ambulance pulled away, leaving a wake of flashing lights receding into the distance, Michael remained standing, his mind a fortress of calculation. Around him, the police presence seemed to convulse awkwardly between stances of authority and hesitance, uncertain how to proceed now that the line between civilian and soldier blurred into something more complex. Michael's senses, sensitive to subtle power shifts, recognized the stares from the remaining officers. Some averted their gaze. Others studied him, as though wrestling with a realization they were unprepared to handle. These were familiar emotions, the kind he had encountered in countless faces overseas. But now it settled heavily in the American night, fraught with domestic implications. In the charged silence, he recalled his military training, which replayed in his mind like a film reel, a cascade of images, actions, and codes. It was these principles, ingrained deep during his years on mission, that guided his current footing: honor, courage under fire, and the relentless pursuit of justice for the oppressed. These tenets were his compass, from the jungles to deserts, and now here, a concrete scar in the urban landscape, was yet another theater of conflict. His voice was steady, devoid of anything but the authority it was due. "What happened tonight is a fracture, a mistake that will continue to bleed unless it's mended with the truth." One of the younger officers peered over, the fear in his eyes evident, fear of a ruined career, fear of what's to come. But there was something deeper beneath, something caught between loyalty and conscience. "Sir, what are we supposed to do now?" An older officer, thick-set with lines of experience creasing his forehead, asked this while maintaining just enough distance to allow for authority without inciting aggression. There was an unspoken plea for guidance in his words, a rare vulnerability. Michael met his gaze, piercing through the veneer of professionalism until only the human remained. "You do what's right, but you start by owning up to what's wrong," he continued, the night thick around them bearing witness. "Accountability isn't just a word for press releases. It's a pact you all signed when you pinned that badge to your chest. Camille didn't go home safe tonight because someone wielded power without purpose." There was silence, a moment suspended in decision's gravity. When an officer is faced with choices, awareness of the ripples they create in the sea of public perception often overshadows the initial toss of the stone. Michael knew this and counted on it. The older officer nodded, uncertainty giving way to a resolve shared in a nod. "We'll start the report, sir," he said. His words softened, acknowledging not just the authority but the burden that rested on Michael's shoulders. Layers of systemic inertia met a soldier's immovable will. This battle was just beginning. With his piece set into motion, Michael turned away, the cacophony of night sounds enveloping him. A city of unsung battles echoed through the streets. Shadows claimed with victory, neither swift nor gracious. Camille's fight was his, and for every step that carried him beyond this night, a calculated move aligned with justice's demands echoed with ruthless, unerring precision. "What you've done matters," Michael finally stated, addressing not just the officers but a deeper audience. The silent chorus of lives touched by authority and its abuse. It was a nod to those who would follow in this fight, building on to the foundation laid with conviction and courage. Tires crunching on gravel, he walked over to his car, vineyard against the paltry streetlights, each flicker a heartbeat synced with Camille's ongoing fight for life. But his resolve remained, anchored as firmly as ever. To me was resilient, their bond inexorably strong through nights darker than this. And as his vehicle roared to life, taking him into a future unfurling with promise and the inevitability of reckoning, The echoes of his military past whispered through the fabric of night. Adapt, persevere, overcome. He left the scene, knowing that actions taken now would determine more than immediate outcomes. They shaped legacies. As the world turned, ticking into yet another day scarred by struggle and shadowed by hope, Michael drove forward, cresting the dawn with the certainty of justice's inevitable dawn. In those mirrors reflecting both past and path ahead, a singular truth glowed amidst the ambiguity. Though entangled in systems seemingly unyielding, justice, once ignited, became the fire that burned brighter than oppression's darkest hold. And for Camille, for every Camille, that fire would not fade. The fluorescent hum of the hospital corridor was a stark juxtaposition to the events that had transpired hours earlier. Within the antiseptic silence, a new type of battle commenced. Michael moved with purpose, his mind a battleground where strategy and personal anguish clashed, each step an echoing reminder that while he had seen more tumultuous sites of conflict, none hit as close as this. His first call was to a formidable ally, a lawyer whose reputation preceded her, renowned for turning the scales of justice with unyielding force. The phone crackled to life, her voice precise and sharp, the kind that sliced through confusion with surgical dexterity. She was a lifeline he had depended on before, savvy in a world where justice too often played second fiddle to prejudice. Michael, her voice was brisk but not unkind. I've heard rumblings, enough to know something went sideways, fast. Michael's response was succinct, every word layered with the quiet urgency of a soldier's report. Camille's in the hospital, shot by a cop at a gas station. Wrong assumptions, wrong reactions. Need to start making this right. She paused, the weight of the situation not lost in the silence. I'm on it. First is securing the evidence, testimonies. Get any recordings from witnesses. Pressure will help when we build our case. For a lawyer specializing in civil rights and police misconduct, this was familiar terrain, a yet another arena where minds and laws clashed as violently as any military engagement. Michael's trust in her expertise was implicit, and together they had the precision of a tactical unit. Next came the logistical onslaught of medical details and reports. Speaking to doctors about Camille's condition provided threads of information he needed. Injuries severe, stabilized with the promise of recovery shadowing long-term implications. Her spirit, though, was unbroken, radiating through the cacophony of medical paraphernalia. He hung on to that strength like a talisman. Michael returned to his car, a swirl of determination. News media had already caught wind, projecting the situation with the sort of horrifying lure that demanded public attention. Uneasy whispers of police misconduct rippled across social platforms, fanning the flames of a fire not easily extinguished. It created an echo chamber of voices both outraged and skeptical, ammunition for both sides in a battle built as much of perception as fact. Legal action was not just a possibility, it was inevitable. The strategy was clear: gather momentum, rely on public interest to provide an unassailable platform, and wield Camille's story as the torch that would illuminate systemic rot. Taking his seat behind the wheel, Michael called in favors, a rallying of individuals he'd met along his journey, journalists willing to report the unreported, people with ears in high places, ensuring witnesses who had stepped forward wouldn't be alone in their recounting when the police department inevitably closed ranks. These connections were more than allies. They were the building blocks of a campaign destined to turn singular tragedy into a voice for many, even as he made calls. With scripts unwinding like old, tired records, Michael was acutely aware of the stakes. Each conversation wasn't just planting seeds of action, but bastions against indifference and complicity. It wasn't enough for justice to be served in whispers. It required the clamor of change that demanded hearing. He returned to the hospital, fortified by commitments and plans that promised momentum. Inside, Camille, although weary, greeted him with a smile touched by fragility, yet brimming with the fight still coursing through her veins. "Lawyers on board," he informed her, his tone vibrating with resolve. "We'll make noise. This won't just be forgotten." Camille's response was quiet but carried the weight of 1,000 protests still resonating within. "I trust you, Michael. I trust that we can turn this into change." And that was the crux of it, a transformative desire to not just right the immediate wrongs, but alter the landscape entirely. Each step forward was a confrontation with those comfortable in their misconceptions, those who wore their blindfolds to avoid seeing the world fractured. As they settled into the quiet comfort of shared resilience, a nurse entered, unobtrusively adjusting IV lines, her presence a gentle reminder of the necessity to continue healing amidst the coming storm. Looking at Camille, Michael saw more than just hope. He saw the embodiment of their collective struggle, a living testament to endurance pushing against the currents. In this corridor lined with reprimands and renewal, Michael was more than a brother or a soldier. He was a commander in a different kind of battle, one where the enemies were invisibility and silence, determined to blaze through them with uncompromising light. As he sat beside Camille, listening to the rattle and hum of the hospital that had become their temporary refuge from an unjust world, Michael knew the fight was just beginning, and it was one he would lead with unyielding determination. The perimeter was set, allies in place. The legal maneuvers were deploying as surely as the first wave of a strategic operation. Here, justice was not intangible, it was an act, a mission, one imbued with the soul-deep acknowledgement that victory was more than possible. It was necessary for every voice unjustly silenced before theirs. The streets of the neighborhood were alive with the murmurs of indignation. News of the incident had spread like wildfire, and with each retelling, the fury and frustration grew. By the time Michael stepped into the heart of it, the community had already begun to galvanize, faces lit with determination under flickering street lamps. Small clusters of people gathered, animatedly discussing the unwelcome but all too familiar specter of injustice that had reared its head once more among them. It wasn't just another statistic, another tragic headline. This was their own. A violation wrought upon a sister, a friend, a neighbor. Camille's story became a litmus test for the strength of their bonds, a rallying cry that united diverse voices into a single echo demanding change. The air was taut with an expectancy that electrified the night, and as Michael approached, the crowd parted instinctively, a sea of support acknowledging the commander of a different kind of force. He could see it in their eyes, a flicker of hope they dared to nurture even as anger pounded within. It was the look of people exhausted by indignations, yet unwilling to let the fire die. In this gathering, solidarity was not just rhetoric, it was the heartbeat of survival. As he made his way to a makeshift podium, a pickup truck whose bed would serve as their stage, Michael felt the weight of the moment, a responsibility he welcomed, as both burden and privilege. A man from the community, known for his way with words, greeted him with a nod. "You're the brother, right? Camille's?" It wasn't a question, it was an acknowledgement, one that transcended names and bloodlines to encompass shared struggle. "Yes," Michael replied simply, appreciating the warmth in the inquiry, the unspoken bond forged in these moments. People began to gather more tightly, conversations weaving into a low hum, anticipation mounting as eyes turned to him. The man gestured for Michael to take the floor, and as Michael climbed onto the truck bed, the gathered crowd stilled, the weight of their collective breath a testament to their invested hope. Michael scanned the faces before him, familiar and foreign, aged with experience, and bright with youthful resolve. They were a tapestry of stories, each thread intersecting with the others, forming a narrative that refused to be ignored. Camille's face was etched in their expressions, her pain echoing in the 100 reflections of her plight. He cleared his throat, the noise carrying over the crowd and silencing the last whispers into attentive quiet. "Thank you for being here," Michael began, his voice steady and sure, carrying years of command and certainty. "Thank you for standing with Camille, with all of us. I'm not here to just share what happened. Most of you already know. I'm here because we have a chance, a duty, to ensure that none of this happens in silence again. A ripple of agreement sighed through the crowd, heads nodding in unison, and, emboldened, Michael continued. What happened to Camille isn't just our fight. It's the fight for every person this has happened to when no one was watching, when no one cared. We change this. Together, with voices that will be heard. A young woman in the crowd raised her hand, and Michael nodded for her to speak. It's about damn time people know, she said with fervor. We're tired of being shouted down, hurt, and forgotten. Her words sparked a chorus of agreement, a hum of voices finding harmony in the discord they had long been forced to sing alone. An older man stepped forward, his voice weathered but resonant. I've seen these streets every decade. We say we want change, but now it's time we do. The synergy of the moment was palpable, a collective realization coiling in their midst, unchained from apathy, fortified by shared promises. Michael raised a hand, quieting the energy into a focused silence once more. Camille made it through because of all of you, and we'll go further because we have each other. There's power in these streets, and it's time we make everyone see it. The crowd erupted, applause mingling with slogans, an aura of empowerment cascading through them like a wave breaking against old walls. This night was more than a meeting, it was the inception of emotion, a cascade not easily halted nor ignored by those who'd seen too many signatures written in blood and tears. In that sea of solidarity, Michael felt a shift, the first step in a wider journey shaped by echoes of the past and dreams of the future. They might have started with Camille in a singular incident, but the journey would encompass all spectra of injustice. All cries where silence once answered. They dispersed under the silence of the stars, whispers of change trailing their steps, a message weaving through the city's veins. One voice alone might struggle to crack the dome of indifference, but a chorus, united in purpose, could shatter even the most fortified wall. As Michael walked away from the crowd, heart emboldened and clarity seared into his resolve, he knew the real fight awaited in the corridors of power, through the glass steel doors where policy and prejudice clashed silently every day. His steps took him straight from ally to advocate, knowing Camille would awaken to a world poised on the brink of transformation, one echo at a time. The morning sun cast unforgiving light across the police department building, illuminating the wear and cracks not just in the architecture, but within the institution it symbolized. Inside, a conference room pulsed with the tension of an impromptu press gathering. Reporters clamored for space, microphones poised to catch every word that might tumble forth with either clarity or obfuscation. They waited for answers, for sound bites that would confirm suspicions or add layers to the tapestry of public discourse. At the podium stood Chief Anderson, a man whose presence typically commanded respect, a stability faltering under the scrutiny of the media and public alike. His hair grayed with years of service, yet each silver strand now seemed weighted with the events of the prior night. The press conference a defensive maneuver as much as a customary obligation. Beside him, a newly appointed officer shuffled papers nervously, whispering stats and updates, trying to script a narrative desperately teetering between spin and transparency. The atmosphere in the room was electric, charged with the potency of expectation and the volatile brew of outrage that had spilled onto the streets. The thin veneer of professionalism struggled against the simmering anticipation for accountability, justice, both words heavy with past grievances and future promises. Chief Anderson adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, a gesture swallowed by the murmurs of the assembled press, waiting like vultures for the story to unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on such short notice. We're here to provide you with an update on last night's incident involving one of our officers. His voice was steady, though the edges frayed with the weight of his task. This department takes these situations seriously, and we want to emphasize our commitment to a thorough investigation. Our officer-involved shooting protocols are strict, and we're adhering to them in this situation. A question from the crowd. Chief, can you confirm the condition of Camille Johnson and the circumstances at the scene? He shifted, eyes scanning the crowd for a sympathetic face among the hungry expressions. "I can confirm that Ms. Johnson is stable and receiving care, and as for the circumstances, those are still under investigation. We have reached out to family representatives for a meeting," he continued, deftly sidestepping the thrust of the question. This evasion did not go unnoticed. A reporter seated at the front, a seasoned journalist known for incisive queries, pressed further. "Chief, the community is demanding accountability. How can you assure concerned citizens that any misconduct won't simply be swept under the rug?" Chief Anderson held the podium tightly, fighting to maintain control over a narrative rapidly slipping through his grasp. "An independent review board is examining the case alongside internal affairs. We're committed to transparency and accountability. We understand the importance of community trust." The room erupted, a cacophony of voices competing to breach the barrier of detente between authority and accountability. Each question zipped like a missile, targeting the soft underbelly of official missteps too glaring to camouflage. Yet for all the sound and fury, the answers contorted under the weight of expectation, arriving twisted with uncertainty. Seizing the opportunity amidst the confusion, Rebecca Owens, a reporter for a local outfit known for its grassroots appeal, captured the room's attention. "Is the department aware of the mounting evidence? Videos from witnesses that contradict the officer's initial report?" The hint of challenge in her voice penetrated the veneer of stoicism Chief Anderson attempted to project. His pause was perceptible, a hesitance harvested by the cameras whirring around him. "We're aware of videos circulating on social media. We're evaluating all evidence. Indeed, vigilance is imperative. Every piece will be considered." As the press conference dwindled, the undercurrent of discontent festered, echoing beyond these walls into the heart of the city. Anderson exited the podium, weariness etched into every step, relaying to his assistant as cameras slowly lowered, "Set up meetings with the community leaders and prepare for more fallout." Beyond the sterile confines of this room, where words were carved with equal parts contrition and calculation, the real effects of these decisions were felt. Michael, tuned into the broadcast, noted every inflection, every evasion, cataloging them as part of the ongoing dossier that was taking form in the arsenal of his campaign for justice. Camille's voice echoed in his mind, bolstering his resolve. As the broadcast ended, Michael knew that what was unfolding was but a prelude to the greater play of justice. The stage was set, actors in place, but it was the truth wrapped within these dialogues that would strike the critical blow. The community stood poised, a colossus on the verge of awakening. They awaited more than hollow promises. They demanded action, revelation, integrity. In the silence following the press conference, the city listened intently, awaiting the next move in a game where more than reputations stood at stake. It was a message for those in power. The audience was no longer content with being spectators to their fate. They were becoming the authors of unfolding chapters of justice, writing history with the ink of resistance and hope. The media frenzy reached a fever pitch as the story of Camille's shooting unfurled across the airwaves and into virtual spaces. Televisions in homes, bars, and waiting rooms broadcast a cascading series of reports, each frame a montage of repudiation against a backdrop of familiar sorrow and unyielding demand for justice. News vans lined the streets where it all began, antennas raised like sentinels bracing for battle. Reporters huddled in clusters, delivering urgent updates to audiences as far-reaching as their signals could carry. Michael watched as the narrative of his sister's ordeal spread, evolving from mere headline into a rallying point, spurring dialogue and debate in public forums and digital realms. Camille's story was not isolated. It resonated as a shockwave echoing the grim hymns of history many knew too well. Yet, this time the focus was not just on the tragedy, but the meticulous architecture of systemic issues finally laid bare. The news cycle churned on, gripping morning talk shows and nightly discussions, drawing in activists, legal analysts, and policing experts, each dissecting the elements of what this shooting revealed about society's festering wounds. Panel discussions brimmed with fervor, a tapestry of voices interwoven in passionate discourse, exposing the duality of perspectives and the fracture lines along which solutions might emerge. While some reports adhered to careful neutrality, the majority abandoned pretense, allowing anchors and commentators to tip their scales toward accountability. A particularly fiery exchange on a primetime slot featured an impassioned exchange between a civil rights lawyer and a police union representative. Their interaction crackled with tension, each counterpoint a vivid portrayal of the struggle to square public trust with institutional imperfection. "It's this kind of reckless authority that drives wedges instead of mend," the lawyer declared, his voice rising above the clamor, carving truths into the air. "Until there's accountability that's visible and reliable to the citizens who pay for protection, these incidents will not be the exception, they'll remain an expectation." His words, powerfully articulated, ricocheted through the domain of public attention, igniting varied reactions across multiple platforms. Viewers typed furiously into comment sections, their grievances and support alike bouncing back in real-time digital dialogues, knitting a community consciousness that traversed beyond the local to embrace a national, even global stage. Pundits and public figures took to social media, some amplifying the injustices, others cautioning restraint, each tweet a bullet point in an invisible manifesto of contested futures. This lens through which the nation gazed back at itself was relentless, illuminating harsh truths long shadowed by neglect. Within the tumult, Michael found the momentum crucial for the transformative change he sought. Pressed into service beside those who had fought this battle from within the structures now tested, he harnessed the weight of public outrage to bear upon the slow wheels of justice, a machine often content in inertia until faced with a catalyst of monumental force. He scribbled furiously in a small notebook, his thoughts forming the scaffold for a broader strategy. "Coalitions," he noted, underscoring the word with significance. "The power in numbers, in voices, a unification of purpose with other families, victims, and advocates he had been in contact with, each with stories uncannily reminiscent of what Camille had endured." Understanding media's pulse, he reached out to local activists, extending olive branches and seeking partnerships, knowing that disparate efforts could coalesce into formidable pressure. Each connection, every conversation with grassroots organizers became the capillaries through which the lifeblood of their cause would flow. Amidst the swirl of activism, Michael knew well enough the importance of maintaining a public persona that could both engage and unsettle those within the systems of power. This role, ever complex, demanded finesse, a blend of empathy and unwavering resolve that inspired while challenging systemic inertia. In rooms clouded by bureaucracy, in meetings beset by policy loopholes and guarded interests, Michael and his allies positioned themselves at the axis of this issue. They propelled the story beyond ephemeral headline. It became a dialogue not just about Camille, but about the fractured world that fostered such moments of profound injustice. Through every channel heralded into action by the incessant churn of media, the message remained clear. Justice deferred was justice denied, and in these public squares carved out by cameras and keyboards alike, denial would not stand unanswered. The relentless cycle of attention was more than noise, it was an overture. It framed Camille's story not as a singular event, but as a reflective mirror held against a society long overdue for change. And amidst the narratives, as they grew louder, more coherent, truth stirred, an undeniable force poised to rewrite the next chapters in accountability's chronicle. Michael, even as he crafted the roadmap ahead, knew they bore the torch, kindled by Camille's courage and the collective outcry of a community rising undaunted. In the small, sunlit corner of a community center, the air was thick with nostalgia and tempered optimism. Samuel Pop Simmons, a respected elder and lifelong resident, sat hunched over a table surrounded by a mix of young activists and longtime residents who had gathered to seek his counsel. Pop was the living history of their neighborhood. He had seen its rise, its struggles, and now its transformation. His eyes, windows to yesteryears filled with tumult and change, gleamed as he recounted lessons that had been tattooed on the canvas of memory. "Well now," Pop began, his voice a gravelly yet comforting resonance that silenced the chatter in the room. "You young folks keep fighting that good fight. Reminds me of the 60s, you know? Different times, same fight. Back then, we were up against hoses and dogs just for wanting a seat at the table." They leaned in closer, feeling the gravitational pull of history as Pop rolled back the years with every word. "I remember when Dr. King came downtown. Streets were alive then, much like now. Same rhythm of footsteps for justice, same urgency." Pop's words didn't just recount history, they breathed life into it. The crowd could visualize the resolute faces of those who marched before them, faces lined both by age and resolve, perpetually pushing against the tide of history. His stories painted pictures not of defeat, but unyielding perseverance, a legacy handed down to those thirsty for change. "What you're doing for Camille, bless her brave spirit," Pop continued, "is more than just justice for her. It's a pathway for everyone among us who ever felt they had to hide because of who they were or feared stepping outside because of the color of their skin." The narratives he wove were simple yet profound, binding the room in a fabric of shared experience, linked not just by place, but by mission. Around the table, the smattering of young activists scribbled notes, not merely the words, but the ethos behind them, the desire to capture wisdom as a guide through the maze of modern advocacy. A young woman with an earnest demeanor leaned forward. "Pop, how did you keep hope, even when things seemed like they'd never change?" Pop chuckled, the sound a warm rumble that settled like a bomb. "Hope, child, always finds a way when you nurture it with the company of the good-hearted and action of the willing. We stood together then, just like y'all are doing now. It's a powerful thing, unity. That's what keeps hope stubbornly alive." The room absorbed his mantra. Silence, punctuated only by the rustle of wind against the blinds. They mulled over his testament to endurance, a reminder that they were not alone in this struggle. The younger man cleared his throat, finding his voice amid the gravity of Pop's insights. "We've made alliances with other communities. Plans for a rally, a march, something that shows them we're unified, won't stand down." "Good, good," Pop nodded, satisfied. "Just remember that this fight isn't only fought at rallies and meetings. It's what you carry in your hearts when the signs are packed away and the speeches end. It's that energy that must carry you through." His words resonated with the kind of truth that transcended generations. They charged the air with vitality, sparks that connected past struggles with future victories that were their rightful torch to bear. Michael, situated quietly at the table's end, listened as the exchanges washed over him. Here he found 100 reasons to believe, more reason than ever to trust in the unfolding power of community syntheses like these. Pop turned his attention toward Michael, offering a studious look that held him steady. "And you, son, leading your sister's charge, know that you've got the strength of these folks behind you. You're not just carrying family, you're carrying a movement. A dream." Michael acknowledged him with a nod, the weight of leadership cushioned by shoulders willing to share the burden. "I'll do what I can. For Camille, for everyone who deserves to walk without fear." With wisdom imparted and resolve steeled, the gathering dispersed into the afternoon light, Pop's parting words trailing after them like a benediction. "Keep your eyes open and your hearts fierce. Change don't come easy, but it's never out of reach." The thread of Pop's wisdom wove tightly into the fabric of their newly forged alliance. Each stepped into the light of promise, knowing that the fight they championed had roots far deeper and more resilient than they had imagined. In their hands, the baton passed through history, a flame ignited by hope, tempered by past struggles, and unified by a common spirit. The legacy of courage, continuing, breathing, enduring. The week was a flurry of objectives and organization as activists converged to craft a strategy that could channel their outrage into effective action. Michael stood at the heart of this planning, coordinating with the community's grassroots movements, turning whispers of dissent into a harmonious chorus of determined voices, ready to advocate for justice. Together, they orchestrated a protest, a march designed to pulse through the veins of the city like a lifeline, breathing vitality into the streets where too often voices had been muffled, conversations hushed as plans took shape. A vibrant tapestry depicting collective resilience, stretching across neighborhoods once carved apart by discrimination, now knitted together in pursuit of a common goal. The unity was palpable during their meetings, charged with an electricity that crackled in the air as they deliberated their path forward. Each strategy session was a convergence of minds, motored by passion and spurred with the urgency to correct deep-seated wrongs. The participants ranged from seasoned activists to newly awakened allies, each eager to lend their hand, each story lending depth to their collective ambition. Posters and placards were painted with messages that balanced anger with hope, words chosen carefully to resonate not just in immediate impact, but in enduring truth. Justice for Camille. Walk without fear. Systemic change now. Each phrase crafted with intention, proclaimed with a fervor that would punctuate their march against oppression. Michael found himself working alongside an eclectic mix. The young woman from the community center firing off emails to potential speakers, a local artist sketching protest murals on large sheets, and an IT specialist developing a live stream to broadcast their mission far and wide. Every hand contributed, every effort amplifying the mission. Their focus setting pressure not just on city governance, but broadcasting their cause into living rooms and pockets nationwide. One evening, Michael gathered the key organizers in a room borrowed from a sympathetic local business owner. Sitting among chairs arranged in a tight circle, each individual shared both trepidations and tactical suggestions. Candles flickered as if offering encouragement, casting gentle shadows that danced to the rhythm of conversation. Samantha, a committed activist with courage that belied her stature, leaned forward with hands meeting at the tips. "We need this march to be a beacon, to show them we're not just a moment, but a movement. Media attention's with us. We need to make it count." Her words resonated, the determination infectious. Across the room, an older gentleman, wearing a cap embroidered with the name of a forgotten freedom fighter, nodded in agreement. "This isn't just continuing Camille's story, it's reigniting every time we were told to be silent. We're showing them the constellations we've formed under the night sky of injustice," he said. Michael soaked it all in, these shared sentiments fortifying his resolve, merging the strategic with the personal. He shared intel from those experienced in civil disobedience, emphasizing the importance of peace within their protest. Violence, never an option, always a weapon turned back upon those who wielded it. "Keep it steady, keep it loud," Michael instructed. "Our voices will lead, our actions will echo. We'll demand change by refusing to be anything less than peaceful but relentless." Logistics flowed like rivers into place as each contributor found their inlet in the cause. Transport, first aid stations, local businesses offering resources, a symphony of solidarity operating like clockwork, synchronizing with the heartbeat of their mission. As the day of the march dawned, energy buzzed through the air like static preluding a storm. Participants began converging on the starting point, each carrying a personal lantern of hope. Intergenerational groups mingled, children holding hands with grandparents who'd witnessed history unfold and were here to script new chapters. The moment arrived when Michael found himself at the march's forefront. As he surveyed the expansive crowd, waves of individuals committed to justice, to equity, to ensuring Camille's name signaled more than loss. It symbolized renewed struggle, redefined purpose. Step by step they moved as a single organism, with chants like a low rumble of thunder gathering strength, resonating into the crescendo of a roar. Justice, now, filled alleyways, spilled over boulevards, lodging in the ears of those who needed most to listen. The march snaked through the city, a living testimony to their perseverance, absorbing support from onlookers joined along the route. It was a tableau vivant of tradition and progress, a vivid reminder carved into the cityscape that justice crouched, poised, waiting to finally rise. As they reached the designated park for speeches and gatherings, perspectives collided, molded by the force of their unity. A groundswell of change sweeping through the mundane, challenging every stagnant norm that dared impede its path. The march had seeded more than dissent. It planted the irresistible essentiality of progress. Camille, watching from the comfort of her recovery bed, witnessed her brother's leading presence, a part of the lighted constellation he commanded with certainty and heart. She knew, they all knew, this was only the beginning, the catalyst to accelerate challenge into transformation. They were more than those who had been wronged. They were evidence, alive and resolute, testament and harbinger of a future scribed not in silenced cries but in the echo of unwavering solidarity. Michael found himself in the quiet sanctuary of the hospital adjacent to Camille's room, the march fresh in his mind, an empowering dance of solidarity that surged through the otherwise tired streets of their city. Camille watched him from her hospital bed, her eyes a blend of pride and fatigue. She was still healing, but there was a glow about her, an undeniable fire that reflected the spirit of the movement to which she had unwittingly become central. The room felt like a cocoon, sheltering them momentarily from the chaos beyond its walls. It was a silence comfortably filled with the essence of family, a shared resolve stronger than the pain that had brought them here. "Michael," she finally spoke, breaking the silence with the timbre of gratitude. Her smile, though weak, was an emblem of her indomitable spirit. "I saw you. I saw all of you. It was beautiful." Michael, who rarely allowed emotion to breach his carefully constructed fortress of composure, felt a tide of warmth wash through him. He chuckled softly, moving to sit beside her bed, reaching for her hand, its warmth a balm over the residual chill of past hours spent on the pavement championing their cause. "Beautiful doesn't even begin to cover it, Cam. It was unity, determination, pure damn grit." Camille squeezed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong, tethering him further to this moment of clarity amidst the suffocating fog of their recent trials. "You did this, you know. You reminded everyone we're stronger together." His thumb traced a small circle on the back of her hand, taking solace in her presence, in the fact that she was still here to witness the change she inspired. "All I did was channel what you've always shown me, never waiting for someone else to fight your battles." A nurse entered briefly, making notes in Camille's chart, an unobtrusive presence but one that brought stirred fragments of reality back into the warmth of their shared space. Michael deferred to her professionalism, watching his sister engage with ease as she answered questions. Even bedridden, there was a quiet strength about Camille, a poise, the sort worn by those who faced adversity with steadfast grace. Once alone again, Camille turned her gaze towards the window, as if seeking the answers for all that lay ahead in the horizon's expanse. "Do you think what we did today will be enough?" she asked, not out of doubt, but as a way of anchoring herself and Michael into the present. "It's a start," he admitted. "Making noise is half the battle. Holding them accountable comes next. But with voices like yours leading, we're damn close." His words were both promise and determination, a recognition of their shared commitment. Their conversation wove through topics familiar and new, threading hopes with strategies, punctuating reality with humor, small, necessary reprieves from the gravity around them. Michael understood that acknowledging the weight of their journey was crucial, but so was allowing the light to enter, to heal. "I've been thinking," she ventured. "Once I'm back on my feet, there's more we can do. There's opportunity in education, teaching our community how to protect themselves, legally and within the system, because change lasts when it takes root in knowledge." Michael nodded, recognizing the truth of her vision. "We can set up legal workshops, have community forums, build a base that can challenge the cracks in this system." "Exactly," she replied, her smile a beacon despite her fatigue. "When people know their rights, know that they're not isolated, it becomes a fortress of awareness instead of despair." As afternoon shadows began to creep across the room, expanding like the boundless reach of their aspirations, they found comfort in the quiet knowledge that they were building more than a reaction. They were etching a legacy. "I'll help. Can't let you have all the glory," Michael teased gently, evoking a laugh that shimmered like old music notes against the well-worn walls of pain and recovery. Through the window, dusk ushered in the night, stars sneaking bravely through the canopy of urban spill. Camille, exhausted yet at peace, eventually drifted into a restful sleep, the world outside stepping lightly so as not to disturb her dreams, crafted upon the foundation of change. Seated next to her, Michael felt a surge of quiet resolution. He was a soldier, yes, but now more than ever a protector of truths, of justice not just for Camille, but for an entire community. The fight for fortifying those truths would continue beyond protests and forums, a commitment that mingled with the solemn whisper of the cooling night air. In her slumber, Camille embodied more than recovery. She was the silhouette of their shared future, one defined not by the shadows of violence, but by the harmony of perseverance and the bright possibility of justice hard won. Michael knew they were far from done, but they were well equipped for whatever came next, armed with love, unity, and an unwavering promise to rise from darkness into light. The community center was buzzing with life, a hub of energy and collaboration, as plans for the next phase of their movement took shape. It wasn't just about responding to injustice anymore. It was about preemptively fortifying the community with knowledge and strategies to counter any future occurrences. Michael and Camille's vision for education and empowerment had taken root, transforming the space into a classroom of resilience and resistance. Michael stood alongside Camille, her determination unshaken as she facilitated the day's agenda. Her recovery was ongoing, but she harnessed her strength to channel it into purpose. Behind a makeshift podium made from stacked tables, she faced a diverse array of faces, each bearing stories and struggles etched into their collective history. "Today marks an important step," Camille announced, her voice steady and resolute. "We're here to learn not just how to react, but how to prepare, how to stand firm in our rights." Every seat was filled, young and old, newcomers and seasoned activists. The room was a microcosm of diverse experiences and shared dreams. It was a congregation united by the pursuit of an equitable future. Among them were local experts, lawyers, civil rights advocates, educators, all volunteering their knowledge and skills to fortify the community against the injustices that had too often gone unchecked. "Knowledge is power," Camille emphasized, eyes sweeping across the audience. "It is the most formidable weapon we possess, and when it's shared, it becomes unbreakable." Her words were the introduction to a series of workshops scheduled to run throughout the day. Sessions on legal rights, advocacy tactics, avenues for media engagement, and more. Each was crafted to not merely survive the system, but to challenge and change it from within. Michael watched her with admiration, feeling the pulse of change thriving in the room. Yearning eyes locked onto Camille, absorbing her every word, feeling the surge of empowerment she wove with each syllable. It was a sight to behold, a testament to the impact one voice, supported by unity, could manifest. As the workshops began, Michael took his place among the participants, choosing a session focused on navigating the legal labyrinth. Here, attorneys demystified the dense language of laws and ordinances, equipping attendees with the language of self-defense against systemic oversights. A woman beside Michael frowned slightly, absorbing the information with an air of incredulity. "I never knew half of these protections even existed for us," she murmured. Michael gave her a nod, recognizing the systemic obfuscation that had deliberately complicated the pathway to justice. That's what they count on. Silence born from confusion, but not anymore. We'll make sure of that. Throughout the center, conversations bristled with intrigue and realization, participants exchanging snippets of understanding, connecting the dots of their rights and responsibilities. A young high school student at the forefront of another session animatedly took notes with a sense of newfound clarity, her determination mirroring a young Camille. "Hey there," Michael said, later joining the young student during a break. "You're really diving in. What's your plan?" She beamed back at him, her face reflecting the boundless passion that could only belong to youth. "I want to help advocate at school, run some workshops with students who feel alone in this." Michael chuckled, a nod of approval twinkling in his eyes. "You'll be great. Exactly what's needed. Leadership that inspires change." In yet another corner of the center, Camille engaged with a group of local leaders, their animated exchanges weaving together plans for future initiatives, more forums, expanded outreach to schools, wider media strategies. She was in her element, a conductor orchestrating the harmonious blend of community resources and collective will. Amidst it all, Michael felt a presence beside him, the unexpected yet welcome company of Detective Ellis. Once adversaries by circumstance, they now shared an unspoken respect and understanding. The detective's expression carried an openness not previously apparent, a willingness to listen, to learn. "Pretty inspiring what you and Camille have got here," Ellis remarked, nodding toward the vibrant activity surrounding them. "People looking out for each other. That's rare these days." Michael took a moment to consider his response, acknowledging the mutual respect that had grown between them. "It's what these times call for," he eventually said, working together to break the cycle. Detective Ellis nodded, a thoughtful pause preceding his next words. "We're reviewing training at the department, making sure more officers are aware, better equipped. Some of what happened shouldn't have. That's for damn sure." Michael appreciated the sincerity, a glimpse of progress within a system notorious for its inertia. "And your role in that? You see this as just the beginning?" Ellis met his questioning gaze head-on. "Absolutely. Change won't come easy, but with this kind of push, maybe it'll stick." The day unfolded as a tapestry woven with hope, aspirations layered with actionable plans. As afternoon sun streamed through large windows, casting warm patterns across floors and faces alike, Michael felt the tangible effects of their efforts, an endeavor beyond the sum of its parts. With Camille by his side, disbelief transformed into determination, aspirations into action. What they had accomplished wasn't just an event, it heralded a new phase of their journey. As the center buzzed with ongoing dialogues, the legacy of empowerment spread like wildfire, ensuring change was no fleeting echo but a spectrum of luminescence, present and persistent. Amidst it all, Michael understood that tomorrow was brighter, armed with the shared awareness they had ignited, a legacy Camille carried forward, bright with potential and uncompromising in its reach. As the legal proceedings commenced, the courtroom became a microcosm of the broader societal struggles playing out beyond its walls. It was more than a trial. It had become the focal point of a community's hope for justice against the capricious coil of systemic prejudice. The air was thick with anticipation, charged with the presence of those who had come to bear witness. Within this arena, truth faced off against evasions, and principles clashed violently against institutional apathy. Michael sat beside Camille, their silent camaraderie a wellspring of strength amidst the throng of journalists, observers, and supporters who occupied every inch of available space in the gallery. The judge, a seasoned arbiter whose face bore the lines of countless deliberations, presided with an air of solemn responsibility, knowing the significance of the proceedings mirrored far beyond his courtroom. The prosecutor, Miss Sampson, was a formidable force, sharp, incisive, her reputation for justice unyielding as her gaze. She stood, her presence commanding attention, ready to unravel the skein of lies that had tangled Camille's life and the lives of so many who'd preceded hers, unheard. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, setting the tone with a measured cadence, "you will hear evidence that bears undeniable weight. A young woman, Camille Johnson, wrongfully harmed by those sworn to protect." Her words wove through the courtroom, stripping the weight of rhetoric down to its raw veracity. The officers, ostensibly brought to account, sat beneath the heavy scrutiny, their demeanor a mix of discomfort and guarded defensiveness. They represented a code both written and unwritten, now called to answer at the bar of public empathy and legal judgment. She had confidence in the judge. As the prosecutor outlined the case, Michael watched Camille closely. Her face, though marked by what she had endured, revealed no bitterness, only an unwavering resolve, a quiet dignity that resonated with her determination to ensure no more names would be added to a growing ledger of injustice. The defense attorney rose, his demeanor polished and meticulously composed. He leaned heavily into the lexicon of bureaucracy, attempting to recast the narrative into one of unfortunate circumstance, a standalone event, conveniently severed from the festering root of widespread malfeasance. Officers engaged in high-pressure situations, he contended, the cadence of his words heavily reliant on suggestions of procedural complications and miscommunication. The courtroom buzzed slightly, a muted cacophony of disapproval simmering beneath the rule-bound interactions. Ms. Sampson, unperturbed, continued her methodical approach, calling forth witnesses whose truths threaded back to the fateful night when Camille's life, and by extension, the pulse of the community, had been altered irrevocably. There was Darnell, a tireless activist whose cell phone video captured the raw reality of the events as they unfolded, the stark contrast between the chaos of commands and the calm resolve of a brother standing firm. The footage played loudly for the room, each frame unflinching evidence of undue aggression, silent except for the visceral impact it left behind. What the video shows, Darnell stated, his voice unwavering, is a direct contradiction to what the incident report alleges. It's clear evidence that Camille posed no threat. None. Across the courtroom, the officer in question shifted uncomfortably. A slight movement, but enough to betray the facade of self-assurance that had been constructed, flawed through the lines of incredulity. More testimonies emerged, an EMT detailing the extent of Camille's injuries, a clinical portrait devoid of embellishment, but harrowing in the certainty of its implications, a police reform advocate dissecting policies and practices that, when left unchecked, perpetuated the very cycle that had placed Camille in harm's way. Every word spoken in that room hummed with the potential to reshape a narrative, to fortify the armor of justice dented by apathy. The defense, grappling with the sheer momentum of truth cascading toward them, oscillated between alternative interpretations and half-hearted intimations of reasonable doubt, both splintering upon the bedrock of incontrovertible facts. Amid it all, Camille remained a constant, unshakable. Her resolve, tempered by the crucible of relentless advocacy, infused hope into a domain more accustomed to weariness. Each time a legal volley thundered over the courtroom, her presence served as a lighthouse, guiding those caught in the stormy seas of obfuscation towards clarity and recalibration. The proceedings stretched long, each hour a grueling examination of where justice had faltered and might yet prevail. As the courtroom emptied each evening, the broader fight did not relent. Outside, support swelled, a palpable promise woven into the tapestry of determined voices and passionate plea. Through each phase of the judicial battle, Michael stood at Camille's side, embodying the mixture of steadfastness and vulnerability that defined their journey. They knew that every closing argument, every piece of evidence meticulously presented, carried echoes of the march, the community gatherings, the workshops, all culminating in this pivotal moment where heart and justice converged. The trial, still ongoing, was far from its conclusion, yet the world was witnessing the potent combination of truth and resolve. Together, the siblings watched as the stage set within the court gave way to sculpting a narrative of change and resilience unparalleled in recent memory. Whether through verdict or redemption, through the corridors of justice they navigated, Michael and Camille knew that each step, however grueling, was imbued with purpose and set in motion by an unbreakable will. As the courtroom drama unfolded with an intensity that seemed to pull every eye and heart into its orbit, the stakes rose higher, tensions sharper. The trial had become a spectacle, a theater of justice where visceral impact played out against the backdrop of complex morality and lived experience. Michael recognized the atmosphere as comparable to a high-stakes mission, where every movement, every utterance or mistake could pivot the outcome. Yet here the battlefield was words, strategies, and the intense scrutiny of public opinion. Today, the courtroom felt heavier, charged with an undercurrent of raw emotion as Camille took the stand. Her testimony was a crucial turning point, a clarion call to illuminate the truth amid carefully constructed defenses and evasive maneuvers. Steeling herself, she met Michael's gaze for a moment of shared resolve before she faced the jury. The courtroom hushed as Ms. Sampson guided her through the intricacies of recounting that night's events, her questions designed to reveal the human beneath the legal jargon, the story behind the statistic. "Camille, can you tell us what you remember from the day of the incident?" Ms. Sampson asked gently, her tone encouraging truth over spectacle. Camille breathed deeply, eyes unwavering as she began to speak. Her voice was a braid of strength and vulnerability, each word carefully measured to etch her living memory into the fabric of shared reality. "It was a normal evening," she began, setting the foundation with simplicity. "Michael and I were at a gas station we'd visited countless times before. It never seemed dangerous, just ordinary." As she detailed the moments leading to the confrontation, describing the sudden surge of authority and threat, the gunshot, the spill of her own blood, her words painted vivid imagery that transcended the sterile courtroom, touching every soul present with the undeniable truth of her experience. Loosening, the jury hung on her every word, faces reflecting a mix of empathy and the dawning realization of the gravity they had been summoned to weigh. Camille's composure was remarkable, even as she relayed what followed: the crack of the gun that shattered night's calm, the searing pain, Michael's presence looming protective against the chaos. Her narrative was a fusion of harrowing fact and the indefatigable spirit that had carried her through the worst of it. Throughout it all, she concluded, recounting every detail with a heart laid open, "I remember thinking, this isn't just about what's happening to me. It's about everyone who's experienced this kind of terror, who feels that their life doesn't matter." The courtroom, caught in the inertia of her account, remained silent, as if pausing to absorb the full weight of her testimony. The defense, having anticipated her impact, rose with questions designed to test the boundaries of memory and perception. They fumbled for any conceivable fracture, a contradiction, an uncertainty that could undermine her account. "Camille," the defense lawyer began, his tone ostensibly amicable but undercut with skepticism, "memory under duress can be less than reliable. Is it possible you don't recall everything as it occurred?" Camille paused, her gaze steady, anchored not just by personal conviction but the silent support behind her. "I remember enough," she replied, her voice unyielding, "enough to know that no one should ever fear what's supposed to protect them." Her words resonated through the chamber, a ripple of affirmation born by authenticity and the kind of lived truth no cross-examination could shake. The defense continued its probing, each query deflected with grace that refused erosion. Michael watched, a tide of pride and protectiveness swelling, the courtroom's theater laid bare beneath the strength of Camille's testimony. She was not alone in this narrative, a point eloquently underscored by the presence of their friends and allies who bore witness to each day's unfolding drama. Finally, Camille's time on the stand drew to a close. As she stepped down, murmurs of support fluttered through those assembled, an unspoken acknowledgement of her courage and the purity of her intent. Outside the courtroom's hustle, extended pause allowed the world to breathe again, each beat of silence a solemn preamble to spirited action. Michael felt it, the shift, the courtroom's axis tilting toward justice, perspectives recalibrated by unfiltered unfiltered honesty. It was amidst this atmosphere of poised anticipation that he contemplated the myriad ways unyielding resolve, truth, and community had entwined. They had become more than a response to injustice. They were sculptors of a new narrative, one wherein they claimed not only justice for Camille, but a broader reckoning that reverberated beyond. The gavel fell, signaling the recess, yet no one truly departed from the stage set for change. Michael and Camille, side by side, were participants and witnesses to justice's recalibration, building blocks for a renewed foundation on which equity demanded to stand. In the quiet aftermath, as they gathered their resolve for future bouts, Michael felt the walls of inertia being dismantled, brick by deliberate brick. The battle was not merely for a verdict, but for the creation of a legacy, rewritten with courage, hope, all lighthouses guiding a world in need of rediscovered humanity. The trial resumed after a brief recess, the courtroom now a fulcrum of charged anticipation. Outside its doors, the world continued spinning, driven by the same forces of division and unity reflected within these walls. But here, within this chamber, those forces battled more directly, rooted in a culture clash that laid bare the divides that had long festered in silence. As the proceedings continued, the atmosphere shifted sharply. Ms. Sampson, unfazed by the mounting tensions, moved to bring forth elements that would confront not just the actions of the night, but the deep-seated prejudices underpinning them. She laid the groundwork for a cultural dissection, a challenge to narratives long held yet frustratingly familiar. Your Honor, she began, with a resonance crafted for impact, we must understand that this incident, while singular in execution, is not singular in nature. It embodies a pattern repeated across our society, driven by biases and systemic flaws. Her words settled heavily upon the room, declaring the scope of what was truly on trial, an entrenched system and the implicit prejudices it harbored. The defense attorney, a man acutely aware of cornerstones shifting beneath the facade of order, rose to counter, his voice aimed at distraction rather than dismantling the foundation of Sampson's claims. We can't convict based on societal critiques. This is a case focused on specific actions, not broad cultural narratives. But Sampson was prepared. Her argument was not confined to the incident's immediate details, but rather splayed them against a backdrop, forcing the jury to connect personal culpability with institutional accountability. It was here that understanding teetered precariously, swaying between maintaining the status quo or confronting the harsh grain of ingrained bias. Camille watched in quiet anticipation as witnesses took the stand, experts brought to untangle the systemic complexities woven through each police encounter. Their testimonies rose, tales of procedural discrepancies mingling with academic insights, together painting a tapestry that illustrated not just a night marred by violence, but a centuries-old inequity. We cannot ignore, Sampson argued, the cultural influence on protocol. What's deemed instinctive among officers often mirrors societal biases, unchecked within training rooms. The defense visibly wrestled with this line of exposure, eyes calculating potential points of redirection. Some jurors, too, appeared unnerved, challenged to untie the knot of legacy that Sampson unraveled, thread by thread. The courtroom, once simmering with expectation, now buzzed with the intensity of realization, a new awareness, ignited by stark truths shared aloud, truths that transcended the personal realm to implicate broader, systemic imbalances. Michael absorbed it all, his mind a furnace of reflection. Here was the exposure they'd sought, a widening of public perception into the machinations of unchecked authority, laid open like a ledger of social debt compounding through tacit complicity. In the gallery, the air pulsed with the weight of change. One granted solidity through witness after witness who stepped forward, offering testimony not merely as evidence, but as liberation from silence. The judge, an impartial anchor in the room's turbulence, listened, absorbing, adjudicating, with gravity that spoke to the magnitude of what hung in balance. Outside, the community rallied around this evocative moment, demonstrations of solidarity etched in placards that echoed the courtroom's revelations. These were no longer disparate voices calling in the wilderness, but a chorus piercing the heart of the city, demanding introspection with unwavering clarity. As the attorneys traded verbal repartees, tension climaxed into a cultural exposé, each point and counterpoint honing the jagged edge separating theory from practice. Sampson's final statements were knives, cutting through veils of denial with surgical precision, each incision further refining the collective understanding. Injustice is more than an individual failure, she concluded to the riveted jury. It's a systemic ailment, one that requires not just a case verdict, but a societal awakening. The day drew on toward an inevitable close, yet the resonance of that declaration lingered, embedding itself into the foundation of the ongoing dialogue. For Michael and Camille, and for those they represented, each moment in this courtroom was a testament not only to the fight for Camille's justice, but to the very sculpture of consciousness that had watched too long from rigid tiers of inaction. As they exited the chamber later, Michael and Camille navigated through corridors thrumming with the murmurs of reflection, their eyes meeting those of strangers now kindred bound by mutual truth. The fight was far from over, yet together they moved forward, each step an assertion, each glance between them a pact to uphold the momentum ignited under Gavel's rule, promising a return to the courthouse with the same unwavering commitment to truth. The world outside churned on, shaped by a discourse that mirrored their battleground. Yet where once resistance seemed futile, now stood a promise forged from unity, a societal tapestry recalibrated with lines of irrevocable change, persistent as the human spirit that had created it. Here was their legacy unfolding at the crossroads of confrontation and resolution. To be etched deeply across the pages of history, each word weighted with justice clawed back from silence. Courtroom settled into a charged anticipation as the defense poised to mount their penultimate stand. Their case, meticulously constructed on a foundation of procedural technicalities and previously unassailable police protocol, now showed signs of strain. With tension simmering like an undercurrent, the trial's center of gravity appeared to be shifting noticeably with every new revelation. The defense attorney, struggling to maintain composure against the tide of cultural critiques and testimonial truths, called their expert to the stand, a psychological consultant whose specialty was in interpreting law enforcement split-second decision-making under duress. The intention was to muddy the impressions left by Ms. Sampson's witnesses, to sow doubt and regain some measure of an upper hand. Dr. Ellison, the defense began smoothly, leaning heavily on the practiced authority the psychologist commanded. Can you explain how stress might impact an officer's perception during high-pressure situations, likely similar to the night in question? Dr. Ellison adjusted in his seat, projecting confidence, though the doubt crept into the edges of his posture. Absolutely, he responded. In situations perceived as threatening, the brain's response is to prioritize immediate threats, often leading to perceptual distortions. Officers are trained to react quickly, which sometimes means their perception may not fully align with the unfolding reality. The court listened intently, the explanation both technical and implicative, the unsaid conclusions dangling like ripened fruit above a skeptical jury. Is it possible, the defense pressed, that any perceived errors made by the officers were simply results of well-intentioned actions taken under overwhelming stress? The expert nodded. It's not uncommon. Such occurrences are consistent with high-stress environments where adrenaline and threat perception dominate. The defense leaned back, satisfied, as if they had cast an effective lifeline to shore. But this line of defense, a reliance on the familiarity of instinct and human fallibility, failed to completely dislodge the deeper dialogues forged earlier. The jury had heard truths that transcended procedural obfuscation, stories that bore the weight of lived realities unfiltered by professional veneer. Ms. Sampson rose in response, her movements precise as she addressed the expert. Her reputation for turning defenses into strategic liabilities lent a quiet expectation to those witnessing her next move. Dr. Ellison, she began, on. Would the presence of implicit bias exacerbate these perceptual distortions in moments of stress? The psychologist paused, unfamiliar territory stretching before him. Potentially, he admitted, the acknowledgement a reluctant admission threading through the courtroom. You could be Isn't it true, she pressed further, that training can both reinforce bias and insulate officers from acknowledging or correcting these biases, particularly in communities they've historically marginalized? This was less a question and more an incision, breaching the surface of practiced neutrality. The psychologist hesitated. Biases, implicit ones, can indeed color perceptions if not carefully managed. It was a tangible crack in the defense, an exposure not just of human limitation but of systemic bias deeply threaded within training structures themselves. The jury absorbed this revelation. It lingered like a current swirling beneath the trial's surface, subtly realigning the direction of collective empathy. Michael watched, battle-hardened, but alert to this tentative shift, from where his calculated gaze traced every subtle reaction, every unspoken exchange among proceedings' intricate weave. He knew courtroom dramas were precariously balanced on the credibility of cast shadows and looming truths. Camille sat beside him, her presence a calm, sturdy pillar amidst the chaotic storm of words. She bore witness not merely for herself, but for the countless others standing shoulder to shoulder in silence, her resolve woven into a tapestry of stories, encompassing the spectrum and realities of systemic bias. The courtroom breathed collectively as the day's testimonies retreated into overnight recess, each side left to distill strategies from the echoes of arguments presented on the opaque mirrors of justice. In the corridors beyond the courtroom, murmurs persisted all around, evidence of the trial's gravity rippling through spaces both intimate and public. As Michael and Camille prepared to leave, perceptions of fatigue and fortitude traced their expressions, a testament to the resilience wrought from relentless advocacy steeped in enduring truths. Standing together beneath the judicial edifices, they faced both community supporters and contentious bystanders alike, eyes open with a story unrefuted, a message unwaveringly clear. Detectives and lawyers joined the exodus, confidences teetering on conclusions, weighed down by perseverance. One trial, myriad futures. Each word spoken, each piece of evidence meticulously laid, marked a corporeal step toward cracking facades reinforced with long-standing prejudice. Night descended, streetlights painting elongated patterns over the urban canvas, reflecting on sidewalks awash with the same courage and conversation dwelling within courts' walls. And while the court's impact reached across city blocks and digital avenues, Michael knew they'd left an indelible mark, a vital fracture in an unyielding structure, desperately yearning for reformation. As they took their leave, Michael understood the compelling battle was far from its culmination. Yet each step confirmed a foundation unshakable in its resolve, sustained by unfailing commitment, animated by courage of voice and spirit. A war not only for justice in a singular sense, but for generations craving renewal, nourished by the brilliance of awareness newly gained. Tonight, contemplation would mature within the embrace of camaraderie, sheltering the hope and understanding that justice, though slow, would inevitably lift under its own weight, a promise of persistent, unrelenting humanity ablaze with righteous intent. The trial's cadence shifted once again, entering a deeper, more introspective phase as the floor opened to new evidence. The sun had barely streaked the sky when the courtroom found itself filled once more with the weight of what was yet to be unveiled. Each spectator and participant alike felt this as a tide, a pulling force guiding them toward truth. Shuffling papers, Miss Sampson stepped forward with the quiet confidence born from preparation and a keen sense of timing. Today was about widening the aperture through which justice might finally pass, bringing into focus the full context of the night that had changed everything. "Your Honor, members of the jury," she began, her voice a clarion call through the crowded chamber. "We've heard many interpretations, but today we bring hard evidence into play, evidence that undercuts the defense and exposes a critical lapse in responsibility." A murmur swept across the room. curious and expectant, like the air before summer rain when tensions cling and circulate. The defense shifted in their seats, anticipating a renewed offensive. The first piece of evidence was introduced, a series of communication logs obtained from the police department. These revealed a chain of dispatches subtly inconsistent with the official narrative offered by the defense. Ms. Sampson presented each log with clarity and precision, letting implications marinate in the silence her actions inspired. "As you can see," she pointed to a highlighted portion of the records, "these logs indicate discrepancies between what was reported and what actually transpired regarding the threat level presented. There are considerable omissions, intentional or otherwise, that mischaracterized Ms. Johnson and her brother's behavior. The logs were direct yet subtly damaging, cracks in the defense narrative visualized for all to witness." The courtroom watched as the truth began to dismantle the well-oiled machinery of deception. The jury absorbed each entry with attentive fervor, aware now of a dissonance that had underpinned earlier testimonies. Meanwhile, the courtroom's energy amplified once more as a secondary piece of evidence was brought to light. A first-hand account from an unnamed whistleblower within the police department, articulated through written testimony. This testimony directly implicated systemic bias in officer training. Michael watched intently, Camille's presence beside him palpable, as their shared resolve animated the space between them. This was momentum, growing more powerful with each undeniable truth uttered, each carefully concealed fact unearthed. Miss Sampson stood, unwavering, guiding the jury toward a revelation long obscured. This whistleblower's account confirms inherent bias within training programs, influencing perceptions even in routine encounters. These preconceived notions were activated and escalated unjustly on that fateful night. The room, tethered by unspoken anticipation, held collective breath as the whistleblower's lines were read aloud. There was a symmetry to this exposure, a coalescence of words and intentions once kept secret now weaving through the courtroom, reinforcing narrative arcs Sampson so carefully crafted. The defense attorney could only muster a restrained objection, an attempt to downplay these narratives' significance. Yet the damage was done. The courtroom's gravity altered irrevocably, as the scales appeared to tip from equivocation toward transparency. During recess, the hallway conversations crackled with newfound understanding, a murmur underscored by renewed determination. Michael stood amidst the throng, feeling the swell of resolve as stories flowed, linking the courtroom's resonance with the world outside. Camille, her spirit unbowed and reinforced by each revelation, found strength in witnessing the system's vulnerabilities exposed piece by piece. Displaying a quiet tenacity, she had become more than just a participant. She was instrumental in unraveling the systemic rot so adeptly concealed. As the court resumed, counsel prepared to call their final witnesses, an air of closing argument now ready to draft its trajectory through hearts and minds. But the day's revealments had left an undeniable impression on the proceedings, a deep mark of progress carved into the intricate landscape of justice pursued. Outside, beneath a wide sky filled with purpose, justice was writ large, forever changed by allies turned advocates, strangers turned supporters, and communities turned united in calibrated momentum. With each new day, Michael felt justice approaching, its echo unrelenting against shadows of denial. Even as the trial wove toward its ultimate climax, Michael knew this was not just about verdicts rendered, but about the truth collectively owned, forged in courage, undaunted by systems well practiced in opposition. Together, he and Camille stood on the precipice of resolution, each step forward guided by empathy, by indefatigable drive, a promise to the future woven with the tattered threads of the past, reparative flames blazing with determination, and the triumph of humanity. The courtroom had become a crucible of conflicting emotions as the final phase of the trial commenced. The verdict awaited like the keystone to an unfinished arch, promising resolution, yet tinged with uncertainty. The atmosphere inside was suffused with the scent of expectation, a blend of hope and trepidation that danced through the aisles, where silent observers sat with hearts tethered to possibility. Michael and Camille waited with bated breath, surrounded by a tide of supporters who had borne witness to the testimony, endured the insidious dance of defense and prosecution, and now braced for justice, the kind meted not just in judgment, but in its public acknowledgement. The jury, a group of diverse individuals, now united by the common thread of their duty, had deliberated under the weight of truth and the burden of expectation. As they filed back into the courtroom, a hush fell, a silent prayer to the mechanism of justice and the moral arc straining toward righteousness. The judge, a figure of enduring impartiality, shuffled his notes, lending gravity to the impending moment. As the jury reached a verdict, his voice carried through the chamber with a solemn resonance, echoing off the walls like the single note of a solemn hymn. The four persons stood, the paper cradled in their hands, trembling slightly, a testament to the intensity of the deliberations and the resonance of what they were about to deliver. "We have, Your Honor." A pause, a heartbeat held collectively as the court leaned forward, anticipation thickening every breath, every pulse. "In the case of Officer Reynolds," the foreperson began, their voice firm, every word weighed with consequence, "we find the defendant guilty of aggravated assault and misconduct." The words unfurled like a banner through the room, a wave crashing with both the release and power of redemption long withheld. Time stretched in the moments that followed, holding infinite stories of those inside who knew the far-reaching implications. For them, each syllable spoke of reciprocation, of recognition, the acknowledgement of pain given voice at last. The courtroom erupted in a symphony of subdued triumph, suppressed cheers mingling with tears as supporters clasped hands in mutual acknowledgement. For Michael and Camille, the verdict was a profound release, an insistence on justice despite the inertia of systems evolved in its absence. Camille exhaled audibly, the breath of her resolve finally unperturbed by the shackles of uncertainty. Her strength, a beacon throughout the trial, had illuminated her path and now met its reflection in the mirrored faces of those who heralded her bravery. Michael clasped her hand, their shared grip speaking volumes in a language crafted from courage and unyielding bond. "We did it, Cam," he whispered, a tremor in his voice yielding to relief, to the renewed promise of their endeavor. Outside the courtroom, under a sky now illuminated with the crispness of vindicated truth, supporters celebrated, a cascade of voices that carried the victory on its wings anew. Though a single verdict, its tide surged through the city streets, rippling across the collective conscience awakened to action. For the community, for every name written in the ledger of the unaccounted, the verdict was more than legal pronouncement. It was a clarion call reverberating through time, untangling unsung generations. Steps taken here were imbued with the richness of perseverance, the steadfast refusal to accept silence as a verdict, amplified by the cries of Merritt Road, echoing through rallies, weaving through stories yet untold. Back within the courtroom, as the judge finalized proceedings, his voice framing the culmination of conflict with grace, Michael turned to Detective Ellis, who had marched this journey to accountability alongside them. "This is just a beginning," Ellis remarked, contemplation in his eyes but a steely resolve beneath. "More need to step forward, carry this momentum." Michael nodded, recognition of shared purpose bonding them through the inflection points that define history's trajectory. He knew well what lay beyond, a world still brimming with struggles, yet fueled by today's fight, drawing strength from the verdict unrelinquished and unyielding. Camille embraced the day's chorus of relief, knowing that though the battle had concluded in this arena, their commitment continued, unbroken and weighted by potential. She understood that change extended beyond gavel's echo, into reforms and education, conversations spanning tables, intimate and grand, reshaping a landscape yearning for renewed justice. As dusk approached, the final chapters of this legal drama rendered, Michael and Camille stepped outside, where supporters rallied in unity anew. Arm in arm, they walked into a world transformed by courage, a testament engraved in resilience, justice, and hope. standing as torchbearers for tomorrow. The verdict was more than an end. It was a beginning, an unassailable milestone etched into the consciousness of a society awakening to the precious promise of equality, shining through the imperfections of its present moment. As the collective journey moved to face the morrow, it did so with a whisper edged in truth. Justice, once kindled, becomes impossible to silence. The revelation of the verdict set in motion waves of consequence that rippled through the very foundations of the police department. As the dust settled in court, a brewing storm gathered over precinct headquarters, where the decision echoed with an undeniable resonance, demanding examination and reform. Within the penumbra of aftermath, departmental scandal unfurled with the grievous detail, all orchestrations of obfuscation, nestled within institutional corridors, came to light under the scrutiny now whetted by the trial's outcome. Against the backdrop of public demand and journalistic tenacity, the once impervious shield of tradition fractured under illumination. Chief Anderson, a man whose longevity in service had bred both respect and reservation, convened an emergency press conference. Beneath the harsh glare of camera lights, he understood the stakes, the burden of guiding not just a beleaguered department, but a community fractured in trust. As he faced the gathered press, a silence permeated the air, filled only by the quiet clicking of cameras, capturing moments poised on the cusp of responsibility and renewal. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here," the chief began, lines furrowed deeper with the gravity anchoring his words. "The verdict and subsequent revelations have illuminated a need for comprehensive reform within our force, changes necessary to restore the trust of those we serve." The admission struck like a hammer upon stone, a resonant admission from leadership, pledging recalibration in both action and ethos. It was an unprecedented acknowledgement that seeped into the spaces of silence hanging in anticipation. A seasoned journalist in the front row stood, voice unwavering and intent. "Chief Anderson, what specific reforms are being considered to address these systemic issues?" The backdrop of flashing cameras mirrored the exchange, each flash a reminder of the transparency now demanded, irrevocable and intense. Chief Anderson adjusted the microphone, conveying both complicity in past inaction and commitment to enact change. "We are initiating an independent review of our training procedures, ensuring external oversight. Accountability measures for misconduct will be strengthened, and a task force will be established to oversee diversity and bias education for all officers." His words did more than outline measures. They carried a promise to those watching, proof that the dialogue initiated by pain could yield a restructuring grounded in equitable practices. The department's defense was imperfect, but intricate threads began weaving the potential to transform mistakes into foundations for change. What once lay buried beneath a veil of procedural rhetoric clamored with renewed urgency for reckoning, now made tangible. Outside the venue and through the cityscape, conversations thrived, a hum of communal deliberation fueled by unprecedented reform now laid manifest. Dialogue pivoted on the axis of hope, ignited by Camille's courage, by the community's insistent demand for transparency and accountability. In the audience, the court-martial, called a steward, a friendly detective perched near the strike zone. Within the police department, within the city walls, transparency offered a lantern in murky hallways generations deep. Collective resolve leaned forward, whisper-born promises rattling gilded cages of discrimination in action. Michael, tuned into the city's pulse and the press conference's broadcast, felt a burgeoning anticipation edge its way through concern. Against the backdrop of systemic reformation, imported not solely through words, but demonstrated commitment, there was significance in knowing shared goals, shared vision for a world redefined. Camille, aligned with Michael from across the city by electronic tether and unspoken connection, shared mission echoing timeless aspirations, absorbed these moments with a silent promise. This was not an end, but a recalibration on the long, arduous road to justice, chased by generations and pushed forward today. At community centers and front porches alike, stories replaced complacency, each serving as a conduit of intention and a refrain of resilience. Where justice, once deferred, now emerged into clarity of purpose, steps guided by courage, listened to heartened vows. Back at the department, Chief Anderson concluded, his gaze unwavering, accepting both the burden and potential to transform legacy from forlorn vessel of history into thriving wellspring of opportunity, a final statement offered to the collective, to the city, staining echoes, tangible and true. We ask for patience as we strive to be the guardians you deserve, but more importantly, we promise change, not in hollow words, but in implemented action. And as the echoes made their way through air and heart alike, Michael and Camille, kindred forces carving path toward shared goal, understood that justice, whispered once into the fabric of history, had printed its claim upon existence, bearing memory of courage wielded and light cast anew. Beyond these walls, fate bridged with potential, echoes ignited not in word but in deed, a justice coveted, cradled, cherished. Herein lay the legacy born of trial and triumph, potential unchained, future communally forged, promises tenderly unforgotten held firm, their path, their potential, endured, promise unbroken, woven by resilience unbowed, transformation hearthborn and irresistibly kindled. In the aftermath of the trial, as the echoes of the courtroom's verdict continued to resonate through the city, Michael stood at the window of his apartment, watching the familiar streets below. The neighborhood, bathed in the soft hues of dawn, seemed both unchanged and profoundly transformed. It whispered tales of ordinary lives, intersecting with the extraordinary, a reminder of what had been achieved and what lay on the horizon. He reflected on the journey that had brought them here, a path strewn with challenges and small victories threaded together in the relentless quest for justice. Camille's resilience had illuminated the way, and, in the wake of newfound hope, they both knew their work was far from finished. Michael turned away from the window, his gaze settling on the array of notes and plans strewn across the kitchen table. They weren't just remnants of the past month's strategies. They were the blueprint for continued action, a living document of a future reshaped by the determination to uproot systemic injustice. Camille entered, her presence as reassuring as the morning light that spilled softly through the window. She moved with purpose, the strength she had shown in the courtroom now redirected toward building on the foundation they had laid. The trial was a landmark moment, a pivot, but not the conclusion of their shared vision. "Michael," she said, her voice steady yet filled with an undercurrent of purpose, "we've started something important. We can't let the momentum slip away." He nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. "Absolutely, Cam. This is just the beginning. We've got to keep pushing forward, keep the pressure on, and make sure the changes stick." The police reform measures announced by Chief Anderson were a promising start, and Michael knew they had to ensure these promises materialized into actual shifts within the department. Words were powerful, but actions solidified the transformation that society so desperately needed. Camille joined him at the table, sifting through documents and notes, her focus unwavering. There were plans to expand the legal workshops they had initiated, to continue educating the community on their rights, and to build partnerships with other groups advocating for systemic change. Each piece of the puzzle represented a potential path forward. "We need to engage more people in this," Camille suggested, her fingers tapping thoughtfully on a flyer she'd designed. The words "Community Forum, Let's Talk Justice" emblazoned across it were bold, an invitation to those outside their immediate circle to join the conversation. "These forums can be a place where people feel safe to share their stories, their fears," Michael added, envisioning a series of gatherings that would serve as both catharsis and a catalyst for action. "We can bring in speakers, experts, make it a platform that connects us all." As they mapped out the future, the phone rang, a sound that had become a constant companion in their lives. Michael answered, listening intently as the voice on the other end extended an invitation to speak at a national conference on community and policing. It was a recognition of their impact, an opportunity to share their journey and lessons learned on a broader stage. Camille's eyes met his, a shared understanding passing between them. This was the chance to amplify their message, to disseminate the truth they had fought so hard to voice in the courtroom. In the days that followed, they prepared for the conference with meticulous attention. They crafted their narrative into a compelling story, one that resonated with bravery and authenticity. They knew it was vital to highlight not only Camille's personal journey, but the collective activist movement their struggle had ignited. When the day arrived, their voices echoed within the conference hall, reaching audiences they had only dreamed of engaging. Michael spoke about the necessity of persistence, the unwavering commitment required to ensure that justice was more than an idealistic concept. Camille, with poise and conviction, shared her story anew, her words carrying the weight of lived experience and the promise of hope. The response was overwhelming, a testament to the power of their message and the universality of the fight they championed. Many approached them, eager to learn, ready to apply the lessons gleaned from their narrative to their communities, to their struggles. For Michael and Camille, the conference was a turning point. It underscored the realization that their fight was part of something larger, a global movement toward equality and justice. They returned home inspired, their path clear, their resolve fortified. As they sat once more at the kitchen table, surrounded by the organized chaos of their plans, Michael reflected on what lay ahead. The path was steep and fraught with challenges, but he was undeterred. He glanced at Camille, knowing that together they were formidable, a united force on the front line of change. The world is listening, Cam. It's up to us to keep speaking, Michael affirmed, his voice carrying the promise of continued action, continued growth. Camille smiled, the future unfolding before them with all its potential. And we'll keep speaking until our voices are no longer needed to fight for what's right. Together they faced the horizon, steadfast in their commitment to justice, a justice sculpted by courage, nurtured by collective strength, and set forth with a promise of enduring transformation. The road ahead was a testament to perseverance, a journey they would continue to walk hand in hand, their legacy stretching into the future. The rhythm of daily life gradually settled into a new cadence as Camille began her journey toward recovery, both physical and emotional. The community, now a steadfast pillar of support, rallied around her, offering encouragement and help in countless small but significant ways. Each gesture was a testament to the enduring strength of collective action, a reminder that she and Michael were part of something larger than themselves. Camille carried the scars of her ordeal not as burdens, but as emblems of survival, marks of resilience that fueled her drive to effect change. These reminders became a part of her story, woven into the fabric of her identity, urging her forward. The medical routine became a part of their lives, doctor's appointments, physical therapy sessions, check-ins, and check-outs. Each day presented new challenges, but Camille faced them with determination, fortified by the knowledge that the journey to physical healing mirrored the broader quest for societal change. Michael remained by her side through it all, balancing his roles as both brother and advocate. Together, they navigated the complex healthcare system, acquainted now with its nuances and bureaucratic timelines, leveraging every resource at their disposal to ensure Camille received the care she needed. Amidst the medical visits, Camille found moments of reprieve at home, where friends and family dropped by with stories and laughter, determined to fill the space with normalcy and hope. The apartment was a haven of sorts, where plans for future initiatives seemed tangible and within reach, where the seeds of justice could continue to take root. Sitting together one evening, Michael shared an update from their grassroots followers. "We've got support pouring in from cities we hadn't even connected with yet. People inspired by your story, by our fight. They're looking to start similar forums, build their networks." Camille, nestled comfortably amidst cushions, managed to smile despite her exhaustion. "That's incredible. If even one more community feels empowered to stand up, that's the change we wanted to see." Her words, tempered with with genuine belief, buoyed them both. They spent countless hours crafting correspondence with these new allies, exchanging knowledge and ideas. Each email, each phone call, stitched together a tapestry of resistance and resilience, creating a network that stretched across the nation. The community forums they had envisioned became a reality, drawing in those eager to learn and to teach. The sessions brimmed with conversation, animated discussions about civil rights, workshops on navigating the legal landscape, panels featuring activists and first responders committed to reshaping institutional practices. Camille occasionally attended these gatherings by video call, her face a familiar beacon of strength among participants. She contributed her insights and experiences, guiding discussions with the wisdom forged through trial and triumph. One such forum, held on a brisk autumn evening, culminated in an unexpected and poignant moment. A young woman, inspired by Camille's resilience, stood to share her own experience with authority overreach. Her voice resonated through the room as she expressed a newfound sense of empowerment, encouraged by the shared stories of struggle and perseverance. Camille listened, her heart swelling with admiration. Here was irrefutable evidence of the movement's impact, a tangible representation of change initiated through solidarity and voice. "Thank you, Camille," the young woman concluded, her gaze unwavering, "for showing us that standing up is worth the struggle. We're here because of you and your brother, because we, too, believe in a better tomorrow." Applause echoed through the room, a collective acknowledgement not just of Camille's story, but of every story shared within those walls. It was a moment that affirmed the direction they had taken, a confirmation that the path they had blazed would continue to widen, welcoming countless travelers in pursuit of justice. Later, as Camille and Michael reflected on the day's events, the momentum of their mission surged forward once more. They knew there were still challenges to confront, still systems to unmask and overhaul, but they also knew that they were neither isolated nor alone. Michael turned to Camille with sincerity. "Every person moved to action because of what you endured changes the landscape, Cam. We're sparking fires of change everywhere." Camille nodded, content in the knowledge that together they had created ripples that would extend far beyond their immediate reach. And those fires will keep burning until we've ignited a transformation we can all call home. In the quiet of their apartment, surrounded by the embers of renewed hope, Michael and Camille embraced the enduring challenge. They moved forward unbowed, sustained by the knowledge that their voices were part of a greater symphony, one that would continue to crescendo until justice was a melody all could sing. With society as their stage and hope as their guide, their journey was far from over, but as they faced tomorrow, it was with firm resolve and a belief in the restorative power of persistence, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of equality. Together, they would continue to march forward, their path illuminated by those who marched alongside them, those who carried the torch into futures not yet written. As the momentum of their journey continued, the community experienced an evolving sense of renewal. The air was filled with the promise of change, collective healing beginning to unfurl across the fabric of city life. Dialogue flourished, a testament to the power of shared experience and the determination to redefine what justice meant at a fundamental level. The forums and workshops that Camille and Michael initiated became gathering points for transformation, transcending their initial intent to become sanctuaries of empowerment and hope. These spaces offered more than just education. They fostered connections, bridging divides that once seemed impassable. In neighborhood schools, teachers and students worked together to rewrite narratives, integrating lessons of civil rights and equity into everyday learning. They invited guest speakers who relayed stories of perseverance and discussed the importance of remaining vigilant against the complacency of indifference. On street corners and in community centers, murals began to appear, vivid testaments to resilience, showcasing stories of triumph against adversity. These art installations were collaborative efforts, involving everyone from local artists to children with wide-eyed enthusiasm, eager to add their brushstrokes to the burgeoning movement. Michael witnessed these changes with a profound sense of gratitude. Each mural, each classroom discussion, was a brick in the road toward reparation and understanding. He saw the burgeoning alliances between diverse community groups as a testament to how far they had come and how much further they could go together. He and Camille were often approached by individuals seeking to understand how they could contribute to the ongoing effort. Each inquiry was a reminder of the ripples they had created, of a community emboldened to take action, to speak when silence was no longer an option. One afternoon, as they strolled through a park newly adorned with art celebrating diversity and unity, Camille paused at a particular mural. It depicted a phoenix, its wings spread wide, encompassing symbols of justice interwoven with motifs reflecting the neighborhood's cultural tapestry. Camille ran her fingers lightly over the painted bricks, feeling the texture of community resolve beneath her fingertips. "Do you think it'll last?" she asked Michael, gazing at the mural with a mixture of hope and introspection. Michael nodded, thoughtful yet resolute. "As long as we want it to. These changes, they take root because they're nourished by everyone who believes in them, and that belief is everywhere now." Their path through the park took them past groups of people engaged in animated discussions, families picnicking under the sun, activists planning subsequent actions. The place buzzed with optimism, a testament to what could be achieved when a community united under a common cause. Evening gatherings in the park became frequent, where folks came together to share stories, strategize, or simply enjoy each other's company. The air thrummed with laughter, dialogue, and music, a palpable reminder of the strength and unity. As they joined an impromptu circle of people eager to hear Camille speak, she looked around, taking strength from every face reflecting back at her the communal bond they had nurtured. In this circle, they were all storytellers, all part of the narrative they were reclaiming together. "We've come a long way," Camille began, her voice carrying across the gathering, "and we have even further to go. But what we've built here, this solidarity, it's unstoppable." Her words flowed effortlessly, imbued with the energy as palpable as any notes rising from the musicians who joined their circle. Camille spoke about the necessity of nurturing hope and remaining vigilant, that justice was not a destination, but an ever-evolving journey. Afterward, participants lingered, spinning dreams built from hopes whispered into reluctant welkin. Each conversation, each plan interlocked with another, creating a kaleidoscope of futures waiting to be made real. As twilight embraced them, Michael and Camille walked home, the evening's cool air mingling with resolve shared under a canopy of stars. They understood that each simple act of gathering, each conversation, deepened their roots, ensuring that their struggles bore fruit across generations. In the transition from night to day, in moments where silence had once reigned, they found resonance, an enduring chorus echoing change. From individual stories to collective legacies, they embraced the unfolding tapestry that connected past with future, struggle with redemption. Within every heart they touched, within every soul courageous enough to speak truth against silence, the promise of community healing and transformation stretched wide, weaving its way into the very essence of tomorrow. Walking beside the steadfast glow of lanterns held high, Michael and Camille continued to light the way, knowing this was their legacy, a promise, an aspiration, and a testament to the enduring, indomitable spirit of justice reborn. The sun's soft descent into the horizon painted the sky with hues of purple and gold as Michael and Camille stood side by side at the edge of the park, their eyes sweeping over the vibrant mural of the phoenix one last time. The day had been filled with the laughter and collective resilience of those who gathered, each person a beacon of promise stretching into the twilight. This closing chapter in the whirlwind journey was marked not by an end, but a profound beginning. The trial, the community's awakening, the systemic shifts, they all culminated in this moment of exhilarating calm. It was a celebration not just of victories won, but of battles still worth waging, of stories still unfurled, like the gentle unfurl of petals in spring. As they stood there, whispers of past and future intertwined, Camille turned to face Michael, her eyes reflecting both resolve and serenity. "It's hard not to think about how far we've come," she said quietly, her words hanging in the air like a shared secret. Michael nodded, his heart full with the journey and the knowledge that, together, they had started something bigger than themselves. "And how much further we can go," he added, a smile breaking across his face like the dawn. Their partnership had been tested, their spirits challenged, yet with each step they'd woven threads of unity into a fabric that held the power to shelter and protect countless others. The legacy begun through struggle and perseverance, promised to be one that transcended time, a roadmap not just for now, but for generations yet to dawn. The magnolia trees surrounding them swayed gently in the evening breeze, rustling with the echoes of voices that had filled the park hours before. In every shadow stretched out across the grass, they saw reflections of change, seedlings ready to sprout under a renewed sun. "We've planted something good, Cam," Michael mused, his gaze unwavering toward the future. "Even if it's just the beginning, it's the right beginning." Camille linked her arm with his, the warmth of their bond steadfast against the coolness of dusk. "Yes, and we'll watch it grow," she replied softly, determination woven through her voice. "We'll tend to it for as long as it takes." The evening gathered its embrace around them, the promise of night, a gentle nudge into tomorrow. Their legacy, built on sacrifice and hope, shimmered under the glow of streetlights that flickered on, one by one, like sentinels sworn to guide battered dreams toward renewal. As they walked home under a night sky blanketed in stars, they carried with them the strength derived from every rallying cry, every hand joined in unity, every voice that had whispered, "Enough." Back in the quiet sanctuary of their shared apartment, they spoke of tomorrow's plans, of continued forums, educational outreaches, and further extending their alliance with voices around the globe. They knew these efforts mattered, each a continuation of the fight for justice that now resounded through veins as tirelessly as blood. In the deeper silence of the evening, as they finally rested, a truth crystallized between them. Justice was not a place one arrived at, nor a static end. It was a movement, a living, breathing essence, crafted and recrafted by those willing to stand up and declare that the time for change was now and always. Their story, uniquely theirs, was but a chapter in an ongoing narrative cherished by all who dared to dream, conjuring a vision where every hand was held, every injustice addressed, and every injustice met not with silence, but with the ceaseless echo of defiance. As night deepened and the world outside their window transitioned into a gentle hum, Michael whispered into the tranquil dimness, "We'll carry this forward, Cam, always." Her reply, soft yet unyielding, was a beacon shimmering through the dark, a vow that reached beyond the confines of time. "Together, Michael, until justice is not just a hope, but a lived reality." Thus, united in purpose and emboldened by the legacy they were crafting, they embraced the quiet calm of that moment, aware that the road was long but the journey vital, and they part of something vast and enduring. As their voices blended into the comforting silence, they realized that justice, though hard-won and ever sought, was a promise they would continue to cradle into the dawning horizon, an echo of hope eternally whispered into the waiting heart of the world. How do you feel about the resonance of justice in your own life? If you've been inspired by this journey of resilience, like, share, and subscribe to our channel to be a part of this ongoing narrative, and walk with us as we continue to echo the call for change.